Ще раз доброго дня, шановні учасники. Вітаємо вас на сесії моніторинг.
Good morning, dear participants. This is a session on monitoring of violation of adolescents' rights. I'm Iryna Nerubaieva, project manager at AFEW-Ukraina, and here is my colleague Vita Musatenko, a consulting lawyer of AFEW-Ukraina. And today we are going to hold this session together, and hopefully it will be very useful and very interesting for you all. So what we are going to discuss today at this session, sure, we are going to speak about rights of adolescents in Ukraine, and we will find out more about who adolescents are, if they have rights, what their rights are, and if these rights of adolescents are somehow linked with their duties. And also we will have an interesting discussion on how to detect possible violations of rights of adolescents, how rights of adolescents could be delineated and separated from offenses, and how to protect these rights. So, Vita, do you believe that rights of adolescents are violated in Ukraine? Yes, we keep hearing about that from social workers, from educators, that adolescents' rights are violated. But unfortunately, before we started working in the framework of this project, we didn't have any detailed information. In Ukraine, there was no representative statistics on violation of adolescents' rights. Because recently we see that people speak a lot about human rights, however, they don't speak a lot about adolescents' rights. So that's why we decided to focus on adolescents. And that's true, because very often when we say that, yes, rights of adolescents are violated in Ukraine, quite often we only grant on our experience, project experience, and we have some very general data. So in order to work on that further, to address this issue, we need figures and we need success stories addressing these violations. And today we are going to answer another important question. This is how to help an adolescent protect his or her own rights. How is it possible to protect rights? We can only do that after we detect that there were violations. So today we will speak about the instrument to monitor a violation of rights and how it's possible to protect rights and who can help protect adolescents' rights. So why do we speak today about protection of adolescents' rights? Well, protection of adolescents' rights, we're speaking about that because an adolescent is a future grown-up adult who has rights. And these rights do not depend on the age, but after an adolescent, an individual reaches a certain age and stops being underage, becomes minor, they have additional rights and certain duties. So if we speak about someone younger than 14, this is underage, there the individual has the right to make small purchases for their own needs and manage results of their creative and intellectual activities. If we speak about a minor, someone younger than 18, from 14 to 18, this is a wider range of rights. During the recent 2 or 3, during these years, in this age period, they can have their passport of a citizen of Ukraine, they can participate in civil and legal relations, they can have bank deposits, they can have agreements with their, they can enter into agreements upon consent of their parents, they can decide on where they want to study, and what's also very important, they can go to a doctor and pick up their doctor. And that's very important because we know a lot of stories where adolescents come and they say that they need some care, some assistance, but they don't get that. But we'll speak about that a bit later. As soon as they become full age, they fully participate in civil and legal relations, and they have full range of rights, citizen rights. So adolescent age, this is a special period because someone or individual actually becomes grown up. They have wider range of opportunities. There are a lot of transformations. And it's important here that we speak about different legal terms: underage, minor, full aged, but we speak also about adolescents. There we are guided by definition of WHO, and adolescent for us, it is someone aged from 10 to 19. So if we speak about these changes of the legal status, actually adolescents cover all the three periods. This is underage, minor, and full age. Do we need any amendments to legislation? Yes, when we ensure compliance with WHO standards, I believe that certain rights will be added for those who are underage, for those who are minor, and of course that will be of use for adolescents and their rights. And actually that will give them additional space for their actions, yes, for their actions, development, protection of their rights, and for more active participation in the society. So today, we are not just speaking about this important topic, but also based on our experience, we can see quite often that rights, that is something that only applies to lawyers and since recently to human rights activists. But is it true? Rights, is it only for these specialists? No, of course, this is not only for lawyers or human rights activists. I often hear about that, like, I'm not a lawyer, I don't understand that, I cannot engage there. That's always very interesting because I say that in order to protect rights, you don't need to be a lawyer or human rights activist. You need to be a responsible person who has the opportunity to address, to appeal to the state and to get response from them. Because if we speak about protection of rights that are violated, we most often say that rights are violated by the state and state public authorities that have certain mandate, rights and duties. And sometimes when they inadequately fulfill their duties, they violate rights, including rights of adolescents. So if we want to speak about violation of rights, we need to see whether the state complies with the duty or the via public authorities, whether they respect rights of the adolescent. And that's very important for those specialists, I believe, who work with teenagers or adolescents, but who are not yet human rights activists or lawyers, because we often confuse violation of rights and an offense. So who may commit an offense? Anyone can do that. If they do something where there is liability stipulated in the law. But if we speak about violation of rights, we speak about the state, mostly about the government and authorized public authorities. That's a very interesting, tricky issue, and in many cases people confuse that. However, that should not prevent people from protecting their rights. And here, I believe it is reasonable to mention an example. An adolescent may commit an offense, but an adolescent cannot violate rights of another adolescent. Is that right? He or she may commit an offense versus regarding another adolescent, but he or she cannot violate their rights because they are not authorized by the government to fulfill these duties, the government's duties. So why are rights of adolescents violated? Well, sometimes because of ignorance, where adolescents don't know their rights, while teachers and parents don't know their rights and violate those rights. Sometimes they say, how come adolescents' rights? They rather have duties. Let them first do their homework, and then they can think about their creative aspirations or right to rest, etc. So that may be committed, that may be done because of ignorance, or in our society, somehow people tend to say that duties of adolescents are of primary importance and not the rights. And there is an important question. If an adolescent commits an offense, are their rights limited somehow? The government, the state can limit an adolescent's rights if they commit some criminal offense. since the age of 14, there are certain types of criminal liability for certain acts for adolescents, and then the rights are going to be limited, restricted by the state. But that is not about violation of rights, because if it is about imprisonment, if the government imprisons an adolescent or an adult person, that does not violate his or her rights. But if they prohibit them to keep communication, if they cannot get medical care, that is about violation of human rights. And there is another question about, practical question about duties. Very often rights go in parallel with duties. If you don't comply with some duties, you have no rights. Is that right? No, that's not right, of course. Well, they go in parallel, of course, but it doesn't mean that first there is the duty and then the right follows. So it is not that you do your homework and then I will send you to a summer camp. No, that cannot be like that. There are rights which are inseparable and nobody can violate them, and there should be a liability for that, for violation of those, and that is why we support adolescents in protecting their rights. And then another question, who can help an adolescent protect their rights if they are violated? Protecting adolescents' rights, well, that can be done by any adult who is not necessarily a lawyer or a human rights activist. I emphasize human rights activists because you mentioned that in many cases people say, I'm not a lawyer, I don't get that. But any adult who sees that something bad is happening to a child, that rights are being violated, that some offenses are committed, they have the right to ensure protection of rights of this child. This may be the parents or caregivers or the teachers who also have quite a lot of duties regarding protecting children's rights. Social worker at school or at an NGO or at a public organization, charitable foundation or human rights organization, or just anyone who works with adolescents. So any adult, any grown-up is authorized to go to appeal to the state, to the authorities to protect adolescents' rights. Okay, and then we switch to an hands-on activity. Everybody who has joined us on Zoom have the opportunity to also check whether they properly understand some practical situations. In order to be sure that we see the difference between violation of rights and offenses, we have several cases. After these cases, after case number 1, as presented by Vita, you will be able in the chat and Zoom, you can write plus or minus, answering the question of whether this is violation of rights. So the first case, it is where an adolescent aged 14 goes to a physician to get some medical care, and the physician knows that this adolescent is now 14, and the physician says, that's okay that you are 14, but without your parents, I cannot examine you or provide you with medical care. Is that violation of rights? If it is, then say plus, write plus. If not, minus, or just write not. We see a lot of pluses in the chat box. That's good that people know and understand that that is really violation of right to medical care. And unfortunately, now it is quite frequent violation, because grown-up physicians, they are apprehensive. They are afraid to say some diagnosis, or they don't know what to do next about those adolescents, so they refuse to provide medical care for them. After that, adolescents tend not to go for not to come for medical care again, and sometimes, unfortunately, that results in severe stages or late stages of diseases. But actually, this is violation of rights, because a physician is authorized by the state, by the government, to provide medical care for those of any age, and starting from the age of 14, anyone can go independently to a doctor and have the treatment. This is stipulated in the civil code, but in many cases, physicians forget about that. And sometimes they do that on purpose. They don't want to undertake additional responsibility. Thank you so much for your being active and for understanding of that is violation of rights. Case number two. Case number two, it is where an adolescent comes to a teacher and says that he experiences bullying at school, and the teacher says that she has not noticed that, and she says, I don't know what to do about that situation because I have not seen that happening during the classes. Is that violation of rights? If it is violation of rights, say plus. If it is not, then minus. We follow the chat box and we see a lot of pluses again. Yes, we see that people say plus. Is that violation of rights? Yes, that is violation of rights because the teacher is authorized by the state to protect adolescents' rights in the educational process. 2 years ago, the new definition of bullying appeared in the Ukrainian legislation, and there is a liability of teachers if they conceal the facts or they do not provide assistance to those bullied at schools. So if a teacher tends to be blind to violations committed by adolescents against other adolescents, that is violation of rights of those who are bullied because they do not respond, the teachers do not respond, and they do not try to restore the right violated. And that is about administrative liability. So where they do not respond, where they do not provide assistance, that is already violation of rights, and it may also be about offenses. There was a wide-scale awareness-raising campaign on bullying organized by the Ministry of Justice. However, some teachers still believe that it is better for them not to understand and not to see what bullying is. They say, it's not about my responsibility. Kids have problems, but that's not about me. However, in the legislation, it is stipulated that teachers can do a lot. And if they do that, then the principal and the teacher, they have administrative liability, and it grows if that happens on the systemic basis, if they're systemically blind to bullying. And it's very stimulating, motivating. After teachers find out about that, many of them start noticing bullying more. However, amendments in legislation for those teachers who have done something, that's very good, right? Yes, of course, that's a very positive factor because they have another instrument to respond to that. They can, and many of them understanding their situation, many of them, they say, I don't want to be kept liable, I want to comply with the legislation. And that's very good. We have positive case law, and we have the practical success stories where teachers respond, and we have fewer terrible situations of bullying against adolescents. Case number 3, this is my favorite, and this is real life situation. It happened in one of the cities where we had our pilot project. A lawyer from the center had a call at 9 p.m. from an adolescent who says, my rights are violated. I'm at home. I do not interfere with anyone. I'm cleaning. The police is ringing at my door and they want to enter the apartment. They want to see what I'm doing inside. What shall I do? Well, the lawyer, of course, explained how to interact with the police officers, that they cannot enter without the adolescent's consent, that they cannot do anything to him because he is an adolescent, they need to call parents. So she explained that all, but then she clarified the situation. Well, the adolescent stayed at home all through the day, but the mother asked him to clean at home. In the evening, the adolescent decided to do that because the mother was supposed to come soon, and he started throwing garbage out of his window. And of course, the neighbors who could see that stuff falling down, from their windows, they were very much concerned about that, and they called the police. So is that violation of rights or an offense? If that is violation of rights, say plus, right plus. If not, right minus. The adolescents' rights, women. We see that this is a very familiar situation for the participants, because living with the neighbors, it's not always easy. So we see a lot of minuses, though plus there. And thank you for that plus, because that is an opportunity for us to discuss the situation. That's a very interesting situation, because when we speak about whether it is about violation of the adolescents' rights, we cannot say that yes, because the police officer just behaved in a due way. Because some say the police officers violate adolescents' rights, but no, they complied with their duties. They responded to complaints from the neighbors. They tried to find out what was happening. So the police officers just rang the doorbell and asked him to open the door to communicate. So that is about due fulfillment of the police duties. However, speaking about what happened between the adolescent and the neighbors, of course, if the adolescent throws garbage from the window, that creates chaos around the building, and somebody needs to clean that. And communal services, of course, say that that is duty of the owner of the apartment. There is administrative liability for littering and for this kind of actions. So if we say that there was violation of adolescents' rights, that is not, but it may be offense, administrative offense under administrative code. This is about littering and waste management. Thank you for being so active in the chat box. Thank you for responding to these three actually real life stories, where we see that everybody faces that, and we also see that in our life from time to time. So in order to detect violations of adolescents' rights, in order to see that these are violations of rights, not offenses, so we developed a joint monitoring instrument. It was done especially for those who do not have a degree in law, for those who are not human rights activists, but this instrument is very easy to use, user-friendly, and it makes it possible to not only register violation of rights, but also to help adolescents and to collect statistical data. Moreover, it makes it possible to develop efficient partnership between a wide range of experts who work with adolescents and lawyers and human rights activists. What it contains. The monitoring instrument is very user-friendly. It consists of the guidelines on how to use the instrument, screening questionnaire, the template of an application to the lawyer, online registration form available on AFEW-Ukraine website, and standards to work with the components. Well, all of that is available from our website, AFEW.org.ua. So the algorithm, how to work with this instrument and what you need to do step by step. Step number one, this is where you have a very straightforward questionnaire that you need to fill in together with the adolescent, and you determine whether his or her rights have been violated. And if this has not happened, then we go to step two. So if we do not detect the fact of violation of the adolescent's rights, anyway, we explain adolescent rights to the adolescents. Very often, according to social workers, and I could see that when doing a screening, questionnaire, well, somewhere where there are important sensitive questions, or in some situations where their rights were violated, even if they do not speak about that loudly, they draw some signs that this is something that applies to them. Adolescents may ask additional clarification questions, or somehow you can recognize that this is something relevant for the adolescent. If a grown-up social worker, whoever sees that this is important or relevant for the adolescent, it is important to discuss that. For example, to suggest a situation. What would happen if your days of your rights were violated, if a friend comes to you and says that his rights were violated, and do you know that you can go here or there? We have had a lot of situations where after this kind of educational explanatory work, teenagers would come and say that, you know, we have had that kind of situation. So this is based on our previous discussion on what could be done. But if we do detect violations, if we have suspicion about that an adolescent's rights have been violated, we need to find out details. We need to ask additional questions. And if possible, we need to have some evidence that the right was violated. What do we do after that? After that, we recommend and ask all partner organizations. We ask them to refer this evidence to the lawyer, to a lawyer of partner organizations, to their lawyer. Actually, we have these organizations in all the cities. So in order to protect the right that was violated, you have a template that you can submit to the lawyer. It is very straightforward. It is just where you present the facts of the case so that the lawyer or other specialists could see what happened to the adolescent, and that would make it that will make it much easier to clarify the situation. And of course, you need to follow up. You need to follow up if the situation is being addressed, how, and sometimes it is important to support the adolescent during consultations, counseling. But sometimes adolescents do not want to address these situations because to go via lawyers or to undertake some steps. Should we just give up? We shouldn't give up, obviously, because we understand that these are adolescents that may be apprehensive and they may have negative examples or experience where they understand that they shouldn't try and protect their rights. Quite often adults say that will not give you any benefit, you will just lose time, etc. But anyway, we ask you to record these cases in online templates so that we could see that and could develop the respective algorithms. Because if adolescents do not protect their rights, they grow up as unprotected individuals, grown-up individuals. They don't know their rights, they cannot protect themselves and their kids. So it's very important anyway to speak about that and to register that. How you can do that? On the website, as I mentioned, we have a screening questionnaire for any specialists, experts who work with adolescents. You can see an example of this questionnaire. So why we developed it? Because, as we mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, quite often adolescents are ignorant about their rights. So if you ask them, do you know if your rights are violated, quite often they would say, no. How come? Do I have rights? Can they be violated? I believe quite often they say no. But if we just talk to the adolescent, if we ask some kind of general questions like about housing, about family, about living standards, education, employment, you see that these topics are very kind of routine and they are ready to discuss that, to discuss their life. And there are options of answers. Some are control questions or answers. So if the expert sees that the adolescent offers this kind of response, like, where do you live? And someone age 13 says, with my friends or outside in the street. So sure, this rings a bell to the expert. It is important to note that that is about violation of rights. because an adolescent needs to live in the family with parents, with caregivers, or in the respective institution. So we also have fields for notes, and then the expert can make notes and ask additional questions. In the guidelines, you have examples of these questions where you can continue talking to the adolescent and clarify the details. So actually, it is just routine discussion. This is part of any counseling for social workers. This screening questionnaire is a good opportunity for an expert to talk to the adolescent about his or her life, what's happening to them, how they are living, if everything is okay in the family, at school. And there you will see everything that happens regarding violation of rights, because adolescents, they need attention, and only by paying attention you will see if the rights were violated. So if you detect violation, even if the adolescent doesn't want to pursue that, we have this online form to register cases of violation of rights, where we collect all the data. How this data can help, and we can show the statistics, we can explain which cases are most frequent and routine in adolescents' lives. We can at least raise these issues when we have our conferences or partner discussions with the respective institutions, ministries. We can try and change the situation just by being aware of that. And we have a lot of interesting examples where we find out about some situation from social workers, from lawyers, and we find out that this is a systemic problem, and thus we can address the situation. We have the data based on piloting of this instrument in 2017 and 18, and now we just continue to continue working with it on the ongoing basis based on results of this pilot survey. So based on these questionnaires, we see that 792 questionnaires or forms were filled in 2017. So we detected 92 violations, but that was a range: bullying, violation of the right to medical care, violation of education rights, extortion at schools, not allowing children to pursue the education process. Quite a lot of diverse situations behind those figures. And in 2019, we can see all of that reflected in statistics. And the next year of this pilot project, we had more than 1,000 questionnaires filled in. We detected fewer cases, but I believe that's only due to the fact that we continued experimenting, we continued discussing, that not always we had the opportunity to do that with adolescents. They didn't want to follow up with a lawyer or to go to court because of their reluctance, because of their fear. However, for us, these figures are important because all of these are individual situations that affected certain individual adolescents. As Vita mentioned, actually, all of these questionnaires, more than 1,000 questionnaires, that's about more than 1,000 counseling sessions to protect adolescents' rights. So we see in our work that these adolescents, even where we didn't detect violation of rights, they know where to go, they know who they can talk to, and where they can refer their friends or acquaintances who have encountered these situations. And now I recall an important thing. Very often then when we talk to our partners in different regions, we ask them about the number of cases of rights violations, and usually they mention bigger numbers, and we say, why do we have fewer of them? But some of them say, but we have already resolved some of the situations. Yes, there were quite a lot of interesting situations where our social workers, they have high responsibility level, they often address this and resolve the situations, but not always they share that with us. That's very interesting. When I come for monitoring visits, they keep telling us about some success stories, and we say, why don't you keep us informed? They said, but that's resolved. So in every city, we even have social workers specializing in different types of problematic situations, and that's cool. But an important aspect that we want to convey to you is that if you have already addressed the situation, do share it with us, because the statistical data, they actually influence our communication, our advocacy, our advocacy for change that are needed. So do detect the situations, address these situations, and tell us, share this information with us. So how can adolescents protect their rights? We have the following definition. The adolescents need to know and act. They need to know about human rights, citizens' rights, adolescents' rights, or adults' rights, and where they can go to in case their rights are violated, and what they need to do. They need to share that, they need to collect evidence, come for help, they need to do what's necessary to resolve those situations. We have some hotlines of the legal aid system, and then we have a hotline for children. Also, we have human rights organizations. This is Helsinki, Ukrainian Helsinki Union, Amnesty International. These are large organizations, but we also need to keep in mind that in every city there are citizens or lawyers, organizations that are ready to help and who can refer adolescents to address those issues. And we do have a lot of human rights organizations where there are lawyers working at the grassroots level, and they're ready to help. So here you can only see some examples, but you can find out in your settlement, in your city. Please introduce yourself to these organizations and work with them, develop a system, a network that will help adolescents to overcome this challenges and to become rights who know about their rights and who know how to protect them. Now a little bit about our outputs, about our materials. You can see findings of a survey that we have actually briefly presented. These are findings based on those 2-year pilots. Also, we have here this information material. So these are findings of the surveys printed out, and you can also download them from the website of AFEW-Ukraine. So do visit our library, online library, and download those. And this is a brochure, a leaflet that we are very proud of. This is actually for adolescents. It was developed as a notebook. So here you can take notes, and also every page of this notebook, it is actually about one of areas of rights. Yes, me and education, me and family, me and military duty. Again, we speak about duties in public places. We explain that it's important to keep these rights in mind. It is very concise, and also a little bit about duties to see the line between rights and duties. Also, there is contact information of organizations in different cities that work in the framework of that component. But do join us if you come from other cities. You can download this this leaflet or this notebook from our website. And last, this is the announcement of our online training course that will soon be launched at their online education website. Everything one needs to know to protect rights of adolescents in Ukraine. Me and Lyubov, we developed this training course as well as all of the rest of our materials, and we hope that it will be very interesting, interactive, bright and useful, and of course you will be able to have your certificate and very interesting knowledge. We are very grateful to you for your attention. Thank you for your feedback during this session, and we hope that you have had a chance to learn some important and interesting information on how to know your rights and be able to protect those.